right. So in this optional bonus lesson, I want to talk about the differences between Vue, React, and Angular. These are perhaps the most widely used libraries/frameworks within the modern front-end ecosystem. So I want to talk about the differences between them at a very high level. In case somebody asks you a question like this in an interview, which one do you prefer, or why might you want to go with one over the other? So the way I like to describe it is on a spectrum, and that spectrum goes from unopinionated to opinionated. So let's start on the right-hand side where we have that A logo, that is the Angular logo. And Angular is what we could call an opinionated framework. What does it mean to be opinionated? Well, if you think about a person who we might describe as opinionated, it means that they hold strong opinions. They have firm beliefs and they believe strongly in them. And that's a good description for what Angular believes. Angular believes that there is the right way to do things, and if you want to use it, it's going to enforce that right way of doing things. So it's kind of the most strict and the most rigid option that we have available here. It's also the one that bundles a whole bunch of things together. So for example, if you're going to be using Angular, you have to use TypeScript. TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript that involves types. The point is, you don't have an option to use JavaScript. If you're going to be going with Angular, you have to use TypeScript. Angular has opinions on how you make, for example, HTTP requests. So if you use Angular, you have to go with its model, its design, how it wants you to build certain files, certain coding patterns, etc. Another example is testing. Angular comes with a testing library and it says, this is how you have to test me. So there's not necessarily a best framework or a worst framework. It's just a matter of trade-offs and which one you care about. So the disadvantage of Angular, once again, it is rigid. It is kind of less compromising. It's less open. It has a steeper learning curve because when you pick it up, there's more things to learn because it tries to cover a lot of different cases in front end, not just rendering something to the screen, but as I mentioned, things like the language you use, things like your requests, your tests. It has lots of opinions built around that, and you don't really have a way to opt out, right? So there's a steeper learning curve. One advantage of that relative uniform consistency is if you go from one Angular code base to another, you're probably going to find similar code because there is that convention that it enforces upon you, but you don't have an option to ignore it or ignore parts of it, right? So now let's transition to the other side of the spectrum, which is the unopinionated side. And on the left there, we have the React logo. So React is a much smaller library than Angular. In fact, it's fair to call React a library and call Angular a framework. A framework usually describes a piece of software that is designed to solve multiple problems all at once. React, in comparison as a library, is only concerned with what we call the view layer, basically rendering things to the browser screen, tearing them down, and building up a new user interface. It does the exact same functionality as Vue, but it is only concerned with that. So the issue there is whenever you want to incorporate other features into your app, such as routing or such as global state management, these are all common things that you're going to see when building a modern application. React has no opinion, and thus within the Node and React ecosystem, there's often lots of competitors, right? And once again, it's not necessarily always a good thing or a bad thing. It's a matter of trade-offs. So obviously, whenever you have competition, there's a lot of innovation, a lot of good ideas and practices come out of that. But it also means that that community is very rapidly changing. React may integrate well with one library one year, and then the next year there's going to be another one. And because React doesn't bind you to anything, you're welcome to switch. And there's a lot of variation, right? How you choose to build the pieces around React will vary from team to team and from code base to code base. So you're much more likely to go to another team and find a React code base that is going to be a lot more different in how it chose to arrange the puzzle pieces around React. That's why it's unopinionated, because it doesn't force a lot of those things on you. And it's kind of the wild, wild west where you have to choose what tools and libraries you want to integrate with React to get it to work in the way that you want. right? But it doesn't force you into that paradigm. You don't have to use TypeScript, right? If you don't want to with React. With Angular, you do, right? So Angular is sort of like my way or the highway, and React is like the Wild West. Anything goes, right? So Vue sits comfortably in the middle. And let me explain how it's able to find that really nice balance. So Vue by itself is just concerned with the view layer, which means it's very similar to React. However, for all those other pieces like state management and routing, those pieces exist within the Vue ecosystem, but number one, they are optional, so they're not going to constrain you or force you into them like Angular. But the advantage of those tools is that they are also developed by the Vue core team, the same developers who build Vue. So what Vue says is, hey, we can give you this bare bones Vue library, and if that's good enough for all of your use cases, feel free to use it. And it has a smaller learning curve because you don't have to learn as many features as you do with Angular, right? But inevitably, when your app grows in complexity and needs more of those front-end features, the Vue team says, well, you can choose to go with our solution, which is optional, but is built and optimized to work really well with Vue. And you can also pick and choose when you want to adopt those technologies. So Angular is like getting a basket of 10 things together. React is like getting just one thing and having to figure out the other 9, while Vue is saying, here's this one thing, and if you want to add on this supplement at some point and then add on another thing in 6 months from now for your team, you can totally do that, and you can feel comfortable that the solutions that we've come up with are going to integrate well with Vue because it's built by the same people. All right, so hopefully that kind of large macro level explanation of these libraries and frameworks makes sense. One additional slide that I have here to show you this comes from a presentation from Evan You, who is the creator of Vue. And you'll notice here there's just a bunch of circles surrounding each other. On the left here, you see that circle with declarative rendering and a component system. You can think of those red circles as basically the functionality that Vue gives us out of the box. In fact, all 3 of these options give us that out of the box. Then the other circles surrounding it are various features that you might want in your modern front-end project. So client-side routing, state management, a build system, how to persist data between client and server. You can almost think of Angular as packaging together all these things. Like this screen is Angular in a nutshell. It's my way or the highway, take it or leave it. Here's all this stuff that you're going to need to learn, and you're going to need to build it the way I tell you if you want to use Angular. React, in comparison, is just the red circle by itself, and all of the other colored circles usually are going to have multiple options, multiple competitors. There's going to be lots of change. There's no official recommendation from the React team on which one to use or which one works best, right? So again, constant innovation, constant competition, but also there's like less of a sense of reliability because everything is changing so rapidly. So Vue, once again, strikes a really nice balance because its core library, much like React, focuses on that red circle, but its larger ecosystem, which is developed by the core Vue team, covers all the same use cases as Angular. So in other words, all those other surrounding circles are covered by the Vue ecosystem by the same team without forcing you to adopt them all at once and without forcing you to adopt all their patterns all at once. So you can gracefully pick up these tools as your project needs them and learn them one bit at a time. All right, and that I think is one of the strongest features of the Vue ecosystem over the other 2. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully now you'll be able to answer why Vue over Angular or React or either one if you are asked to advocate for any one of those 3. Hopefully that makes sense. And with that, I will see you in the next lesson.